With Team of the Season just around the corner, if you guys need FIFA 23 coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. So what's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-2-2 formation, one of the best direct formations in FIFA 23. Now just before we get into today's video guys, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop this video a thumbs up, as that does really help me out. Also sub to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you actually get notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside guys, let's get right into today's video. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics for the defensive style, I like to have this on balanced. This is so we have the greatest control over our defense, where we're able to press when we need to press, but we're also able to drop off and be a little bit more conservative when we need to be. So balance is super important for getting the control over your defenders. You can use pressure tactics if you feel more comfortable, but I do suggest getting used to balanced. Now moving on to the width, I have this on 35. This is so we can primarily defend in a narrow shape, so we can block all those attacks through the middle, which is super important because that is where the goal is. The goal is obviously in the middle, so it makes sense that that is the primary area that we want to cover. But by having the width on 35, we still have a little bit of natural width to the team, where we're also able to reach out to the wings in case an opponent tries a wider attack. If this feels too narrow for you in defense, you can obviously up this, but it doesn't, it doesn't really matter what width you have. You can have this 45, you can have this 35 like I do, you can have it as whatever, but I suggest going for a little bit of a more narrow width. Now moving on to the depth, I like to have this on 60. This is so our defensive line isn't super low to the point where we're always getting pinned back, but at the same time it's not always too high either to the point where we're just getting through balled. So having the depth on 60 gives us a nice balanced defensive line where sometimes we can drop a little bit deeper and other times we can push a little bit higher up the pitch. It's super nice to have that balance. Now moving on to build-up play guys, I suggest having this on balanced. This is because it gives you the most variety in your build-up. Sometimes you can play a little bit quicker if you want to, other times you can play a little bit slower. You really are able to mix it up. It's also the most consistent with FIFA 23 gameplay, because those of you that play this game a lot will understand that FIFA 23 gameplay is super inconsistent. Sometimes you can have fast gameplay, other times you can have slow gameplay. So if you had like really slow gameplay, for example, using fast build-up would not be a good idea, but if you had really quick gameplay, you could use something like fast build-up. But balanced is just the most consistent because FIFA 23 gameplay, yeah, it's a write-off, isn't it, to be honest. Now moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest using this on direct passing. This is because it's the most meta option you can use, where your attackers will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. Players also make the extra movements in the box so you can get that extra pass off to guarantee the goals and minimize the RNG. Now if you don't like direct passing, you can use something like forward runs, which will push your team very far into your opponent's half, but just beware, if you use this and you lose the ball, you are in a lot of trouble. Now moving on to the attacking width guys, I like to have this on 45. Now the reason I do this is because I don't want the width to be too low to the point where our players are like sat on top of each other, because if we have it too narrow, our players are all going to be like covering the same area, which is not what we want. And likewise, if we have this like super high with a high width, it's going to feel like a 4-2-4, which is not what we want either. So we kind of go for something in between where it's neither too narrow or too wide, so it's just nice and balanced on 45. Now moving on to players in box, I like to have this on 6. This is so we can get some players into the box to create those chances, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we get counter-attacked. As for corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because there is a corner kick routine that I use which requires both of these to be on 1. Link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now moving on to the plays you want to use guys, for the 2 strikers I suggest going for a balance between the 2. What I suggest doing is having one more creative player on one side and then a more poacher finisher player on the other side. This is so we've got like that creator finisher dynamic, which allows us to switch up our attacks. If we just had like 2 out and out finishers, would be very one dimensional and we'd be limited to things like through balls and crosses all the time. But by having one creative player there, we're also able to switch up what we do a little bit. On the flip side, if we have 2 creative players at striker, yeah, we're going to be able to create a lot of chances, but we're not really going to be able to finish them off. So I just suggest going for a balance between the two. Now moving on to the 2 cams, guys, I suggest going for like winger style players. These are players with like good pace, good dribbling, good skill moves, good shooting and crossing, basically a good all-round attacking game. But I think it's super important that you don't use players that are super clunky and players with no creative ability, otherwise you're going to struggle, as these are the main playmakers in the team. Now moving on to the 2 CDMs, guys. On the left CDM, I suggest having him as a more defensive minded player. So what I would do is go for somebody with a medium high work rate if you can get it, so you get the maximum contributions in defense and they're not too bothered about going forward. You just want to get somebody with really good defensive stats in this position. Now moving on to the right CDM, I suggest going for a more box to box style player. So you're going to want somebody with a high work rate if you can get it, but again, it's not a necessity because you're going to get the maximum contributions in attack and defense, and you're just going to want somebody with a nice well-rounded card so they can do a bit of everything. Now moving on to the fullbacks, I like to go for a balance between the two. So my left back is Roberto Carlos, and he's a bit more attacking minded, so he's actually going to contribute going forward for us. So I think it's important that you at least have one fullback that is capable of going forward. In the right back position, I go for somebody that's a little bit more defensively sound but maybe lacks that attacking ability. So I just have that balance between the 2 fullbacks. You guys don't have to if you don't want to. As for the centre backs and the keeper, these just need to be as good as you can get them. Now moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the strikers, I just have them on stay central and mixed attack. We have them on stay central because it's important for them to cover those central areas, as that's where the strikers should be. If we have them drifting out wide, they're not in the correct position and they're not where we want them to be. So it's important that we have them on stay central so they always maintain the correct position. I also have them on mixed attack as opposed to get in behind, because you get a lot more out of your players, especially in the build-up. If you have them on getting behind, they're always making runs in behind, of course, and it's a very one-dimensional style. You're just constantly going to be playing those through balls. But if you have them on mixed attack, they do get more involved in the build-up and you get a lot more out of them. Now moving on to the 2 cams, guys, I just have them on get into the box for cross. The reason I do this is because it stops them being so hesitant when we get to the penalty area. If we have them on balanced crossing runs, sometimes they don't commit into the penalty box and they kind of like get scared to actually attack, and they don't really move that much. But when you put them on get into the box cross, it means they will make the transitional runs to get as involved in the attack as possible. Now moving on to the left CDM, the more defensive minded CDM, we have him on stay back while attacking, cut passing lanes and cover centre. We have him on stay back while attacking because he is a defensive player, so we do want him to stay back. We have him on cut passing lanes, so he's always looking to break up the play and intercept passes, which is super important. And then we have him on cover centre, so he always covers those central areas because we don't really need him to cover the wider areas, as we've already got 2 players on each side to do that. Now moving on to the right CDM, the more box-to-box style player, we have him on completely default settings and then cover center. We have him on default settings because we don't really want to restrict this player all that much. He has a bit of a free role in this team where we want him to do a bit of everything, so we kind of just let him. The only important thing is that we have him on cover center, so he does focus on defending those central areas as opposed to covering those wings. Now moving on to the left back, my more attacking minded fullback, I have him on balanced attack and overlap. The reason I do this is to add extra width to the attack, because the 4-2-2, although it's one of the more wider narrow formations, if that makes sense, it still does have a lack of width at times. So it's important to commit one of the fullbacks forward, I think, and give them the overlap run type, so you always have at least one wider option when you are going forward, and it makes it very difficult for your opponent to defend. Now moving on to the right back, my more defensive minded fullback, I have him on stay back and overlap. We have him on stay back, so we always at least have 3 defenders back, and then we have him on the overlap run type, because if I press L1 to send him forward on a run, he's going to make the overlapping runs to add extra width. As for centre backs and the goalkeeper, I just leave them on default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-2-2. If you have enjoyed or found it useful, please be sure to drop it a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and yeah guys, I hope you've enjoyed and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.